Welcome in, everybody, to the Box Score Network. We have Shane tonight, and I am Ben Parker, and it is a privilege to have all of you watching. We're pretty hot in free agency right now, but the draft work continues for us tonight. LT Overton, edger from Alabama. I've got a whole bunch of notes put together here. Shane's got a bunch of work put together. Let's set the table real quick on LT Overton, then I'll hand it to Shane. Height 6'3", weight 276. Arm length that I saw listed 33 and a quarter. 10-yard split 1.7, 40-yard dash 4.87 for those of you who value those things. Shane, let's get into it. You and I have watched a lot of tape on these players, specifically LT Overton.
Yeah, I mean, LT Overton for the defensive line guys has kind of really been a conundrum for me, Ben. Because he's a guy where I see flashes of brilliance, and then I also see enough things that make me worry. Um, I'll kind of cover what I think is some of his best traits. The number one thing that sticks out is he's got a motor. He's not a guy that I worry about taking plays off, um, not giving his all in games that it counts, and he'll take it to the best offensive linemen that are in front of him. No questions about that. Uh, he's another guy where I think the defensive scheme has hurt him a little bit because he played multiple positions along that line. Whatever they asked him to do, he'd slide inside, he'd kick outside. He even played some nose on a couple of different downs. And at 280, that's small for playing on the inside nowadays. Um, I think his pass rush ability, he has multiple moves. Pretty good getting off the ball. Not outstanding. Not like Aaron Donald fly off the hook type speed, but does an excellent job getting down. The problem for me though is last year 39 pressures to this year 24 pressures. Yes, did people know what was coming? But you look at the tape from 24 to 25 and it looks like a different player. Normally, you hope that change gets better as the year goes on. In this case, I don't think it did. The thing that worries me about him the most, uh, his tackling this year was terrible. Before he tackled, missed tackle percentage was at like 6%. That jumped all just below 30 this year. Had some opportunities where he just didn't make plays in the backfield. Um, his hand placement got, I don't know if it was, we might find out later on that there's some injuries that maybe they did a good job of hiding. Um, but his punch didn't seem as violent as it was in the years past. Uh, had some real issues with pad level, which for a guy that has a high motor and attacks as much as he does was surprising for me to see in film. Um, a guy that really had the upside going into this year, and I expected him to kind of explode. When you watch the tape, I saw more deficiencies this year than the year past. So, I think he's going to be a guy that shuffles around. Was probably thought of pretty high in the beginning, and I know he's gone down on my draft board this year.
That's very good. You have a couple of things there that won't show up in my notes, so I always love it when we can present different things. That's the advantage of having two or three different people on this show. I have an obnoxious amount of notes tonight on Overton, so for those of you who want to skip that and hear Shane's final word on Overton, just scroll ahead a few minutes. That's totally fine if you want that. But here we go. I love his lateral quickness. Side to side, that's very effective. Seems to have very quick feet, bounces and moves
Mm-hmm.
easily in his small area of the field. So that's valuable. There's other people that have that, but he has that too. So I was happy with that. You mentioned it plays both defensive end and defensive tackle, so that shows that he is flexible. But again, hurt by scheme a little bit on that too. That's not always great for the player, but that's good for the team. Here's some moves. Has a slow spin roll move. It's an interesting move. Not everybody does
Mm-hmm.
that. You mentioned that he has moves. One of them is a very slow spin roll. Um, has that occasional spin move. Has good strong hands. Seems to be winning more than his share of hand battles. But you mentioned it. The hand placement not good. And is that injury related? Maybe we'll never know. But that is also true there. But the hands to me looked strong in the games that I watched. Can win off the edge, but is not super quick off the edge. So again, this is a guy who can get pressure off the edge in one of the best leagues in college football. So I would expect that some at the NFL level. I just don't see that elite get around the edge that we'll see from some other guys in this draft. So I didn't put that particularly high. Looks to be very good in the run game. So it's a good hard edge. Not elite versus the run, but certainly cleans things up. Makes a lot of tackles for small gains, holds up at the point of attack, good, strong run defender. So that's got some value right there. Again, not elite. I've got even a note farther down here. I can tell a difference when he's not in the game versus when he is. And Alabama's run defense is a lot better when he's in the game. So
Mm-hmm.
you can tell a difference there. I always put some value on that, so that's going to hold up. Is very good at being the underman on stunts, which is an odd thing to be good at, but he is. Somebody's got to be the over, somebody's got to be the under. I don't think he's got the quickness to be the over guy, but as far as being the under guy, boy, he seems to be very fluid at that, reaching over, setting the block, moving quickly, getting out of the way, creating a good path for teammates. I thought he traded places very quickly. I thought he had the strength and leverage, and then even steal off of that even though he's not the primary rush guy in that instance, he can still work his way into the backfield off of some of those plays. So I thought that was effective as well. His favorite, most effective way to get to the quarterback is to ram right into the blocker, then slap their hands away and step by quickly. Again, it's a little quirky. He's got a couple of odd moves that don't really fit your normal stuff here, but hey, they're moves, and he's got three or four of them. So that seems to be his favorite one, and he works it and he gets to the quarterback. Having said that, he's just not overpowering everything on his way to the quarterback. He's strong, frequently works his way into the backfield, but he's not a dominant, irresistible force. I mentioned not great straight line speed for an edge. Last couple of things here. Uh, 20 to 30% of his pressures seem to take a long time. And by that, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yes, he got there. And yes, he created stress, but a lot of them seem to come at seconds 3, 4, and 5, not at seconds, the second, right? And that's a big difference. So yeah, he's producing, and yeah, I like him, but this was not an elite player to me when I did the tape on him. So Shane, back to you. I am interested, kind of your range on where you would be looking at him. I'm fairly certain I'm going to be higher than you and probably most people watching as far as my range. But 6 months ago, I would have been significantly lower than everybody on where I would take him. So tell us that, and then any final thoughts here on Overton.
Well, I'll tell you, Ben, I think, like you said, he's one of the more tape that I watched, the more things kind of popped up that I was worried about. I think the thing that you mentioned that does stick out, though, is that defense was much worse when he's not out there. Um,
Yeah,
it lost not only it looked like somebody that truly knew what he was doing out there, but an enforcer, someone that wasn't afraid to get in front of people and fight the battles when they needed to be fought. Uh, like I said, if this is last year, he's bottom of the first round for me. My
okay,
concern for him that would drop him is that, and it's incredibly odd to say that someone that's 6'3" and 280 pounds is a tweener, but in all honesty, he's a little bit short and not quite as fast as your regular end now in the NFL,
right.
and he's not quite big enough to be the true defensive tackle that we now see in the NFL. I think his versatility, if you find, when we're talking Minnesota, we're talking Kansas City, some defensive coaches that are going to play around and let guys do what they're best at and will cover up the weaknesses. I think he fits great in a foundation like that. He's not going to be a guy for me that's ever going to be your number one on the outside. He's not, that's the numbers don't show it. The play doesn't show it. That's not what you're looking for. Can he be the guy on your backside that protects for the run? Just like you said, his dynamic plays happen 3 seconds after the ball snap. He's not a run around the edge, get to the
Yeah,
quarterback before you know what's going on. He's a
right.
quarterback, takes a look, doesn't want to get hit by the first end and runs right into LT Overton.
Right.
That's like you said, it doesn't matter. The sack happened. You're going to get the pat on the back, but you're also not the one that's really forcing the pressure. For me, I think if this was Alabama a few years ago where you had Saban's name on it, I think that jumps him up too. I think
Okay.
not having that type of background anymore at Alabama, I think these guys that normally got picked higher in the late first round, early second round because that was the A that was on their hat. I think those guys are starting to fall back. Um, I think right now he's probably going to be a late second, early third for me. Just because I think there's going to be such a run on defensive ends that are the smaller, faster, and that teams are going to try to load up on that. And then he's a guy that, could play 10 years in the NFL, but coming out in the draft, he's not going to be one of your top 50.
You and I are very close on Overton, a little bit closer even than I thought we would be. You make a great point about the Saban thing because a lot of people, there are people who don't necessarily care where you played college, and to an extent, I agree. But there are certain places that you think you know what you're getting when you get a player from those places. Alabama used to be one of those players because you would assume Saban is only going to recruit a certain kind of athlete, so you figure he already fits certain parameters athletically. But then also you assume Saban's going to teach this guy. Saban and the staff is going to coach this guy up from a technique standpoint, and he's going to be, he's going to be ready by the time he steps in. That's not always true for everybody. It doesn't mean they're bad coaches. It's just Saban did that. A couple of other notes here I'll toss in on my side. I thought he looked confused at times. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why, but especially on like misdirection plays, there were times I thought he just didn't read very well. And it's not every play, but there were times I picked up on that. And as far as the guy here, because you mentioned the tweener type stuff, if he's the smaller edge kind of a category, how would he hold up in pass coverage? Well, he doesn't. He can drop into pass coverage as a zone. It doesn't look natural. It's not like he's really playing pass coverage. He's just kind of covering a shallow zone because they needed to mix things up. So we can't really do that either. So again, I've got a player here who's got flexibility. I think a solid NFL guy, a producer. I just don't really see Pro Bowl and certainly not all pro level stuff here someday. That's not what I'm seeing. I've got a mid to late second round is where I'm at
Mm-hmm.
on LT Overton. So I'm slightly higher than you, but not by a lot. The athleticism here just isn't great for me when I watch the tape, and then the combine more or less backed that up. What I've already seen on the tape. I've got a productive guy. I like his run defense. He will get to the quarterback, but you're exactly right. I hate to call them cleanup sacks, but that tends to be what they are. It tends to be plays where the quarterback got flushed and Overton eventually got there. He's usually not the first guy on the scene. So, final thought here on Overton. We're done, man.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, Ben, I see a long career for LT Overton? Yes.
Yeah,
But I I can't see because in all the film I've watched, I've never seen it. I don't see him as a number one edge rusher.
right.
So if you're not one of the number one edge rushers, how truly high can a team look for you? Because uh, nowadays you need that. You need to have. I mean, every team would hope for two, but you need at least one that's a prime. That
Right.
that on he's going to win more battles than he loses. And right now, that's not LT Overton.
Right.
He's going to get handled sometimes, and that can't be your number one. That's where you get yourself in trouble. Um, I like you said, you're a little bit higher on him than I am, Ben. Uh, I would say that's pretty normal on our end. I normally end up being a little bit conservative on
Yes.
that type of push. Uh, but like you said, some of that confusion, I also think it's because he's playing multiple positions. You know, he could be defensive tackle on one draw and then he's the end on the second draw and you don't know if he's playing both of them the right way. It's just a different responsibility because you're so used to looking at him trying to run a ball down. Um, like I said, I think he'll be great once he gets in somebody's camp. He's a worker. they'll find a spot for him. But he's not a 1A for me. And if you're going to be a defensive end in the NFL and get picked in the first round, I better see absolute havoc on your game film.
Yeah, agree. All right. Shane, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for watching. We've been putting out during this off season the prospects on two different um, networks, that is Box Score, and you also see Pro Football Enterprises. Largely, the defensive guys have gone out over on Box Score here, and the offensive guys have gone out over on Pro Football Enterprises. So whichever one you want, we've got a bunch of them out, and they're all fairly in depth. We don't spend an hour talking about each guy, but we try to hash out everything that might show up on tape from these guys. And when you have two or three people, you tend to catch a lot of that. Shane, last thought here. Tell everybody what's coming up with you and Simon Short and where they can find it.
Well, kind of the battle against this, Ben, is Simon has reached out and welcomed me in as a possible friend of Simon and Friends, and a chance to discuss the offensive linemen in the NFL currently, and a hot free agent group right now for offensive linemen, and the draft coming up. Um, we're going to break it down tonight. And it's kind of talking about these guys that have to battle against these LT Overtons, these rush ends, and where can you find value and for offensive linemen, and what are some non-negotiables? Who are the Will Campbells in this year's draft where you're going to find one physical trait that you're going to worry about if that's the guy you pick? And I'm sure Simon and I both seem to have a pretty high level of compassion for offensive linemen. So I'm sure it'll be a fun discussion to say the least.
Very much looking forward to it. Everybody, thank you for watching and have a great one. Bye.